Hey guys, hope you are all good. I am just dropping in with a webinar. It's been an absolute hot minute, but I've got one. We're going to cover calorie splits. This is going to be short and sweet and simple, basically. Yeah, I don't think this is going to be more than a 15-minute jobby. So, calorie splits. So, when you are tracking your calories, you will at some point decide how many calories you're going to eat each day. Now, obviously, if you are trying to lose body fat, you are going to want to be in a calorie deficit. If you are bulking, you want to be in a mild to moderate calorie surplus. So you have surplus energy, basically eating more calories than your body actually needs. And if you are literally just maintaining, then you're going to be eating around your maintenance calories. Probably some days it's going to be slightly lower, some days it's going to be slightly higher. And that notion, like, put a pin in that idea of basically some days it's going to be lower, some days it's going to be higher, because that's probably one of the most important things that we are going to take away from calorie splits. But I'll come to that. So, what are they? Essentially, it refers to how you divide your calories up across the week. You would consider having different calorie goals on different days, depending on your training, your social plans, your appetite, your training goals or your physique goals, and also metabolic reasons as well, which I will come on to. But essentially, there's no sort of like one size fits all. Like, some people work really well with some splits, some people work really well with other splits. Essentially, like, what you're thinking of here, and this is how you should view calories in general, is you're dividing up your weekly goal rather than setting yourself a specific daily goal. You want to be looking at your calories across the week and then distributing them on different days or at certain periods of the week, i.e., the weekends, or on training days, etc. Depending on what you want to achieve, because obviously at the end of the day, like, calories are energy. If you have greater energy demands, i.e., training, or greater energy requirements, i.e., social plans, you're obviously going to want to focus a bulk of your calories on those days, with lower calorie days on the days that you don't have as much of a requirement or a demand. So, training performance splits. Some of my OG clients might remember I used to favor a training performance split, and then I got wise. There's nothing wrong with a training performance split. I just think ultimately they are only ideal for a certain group of people. I think there are better splits for people with different goals. Obviously, most of the people I coach are women. Obviously, you will train very hard, or like females do train quite hard, but it takes a little while to get to the point where they do train harder. And therefore, even though you are still doing movement, you possibly don't need, if you are especially a training newbie as well, you possibly don't need a training performance split with rest day and training day calories, because you're not going to be training, balls to the wall, and you're not going to be completely running your energy levels down. Whereas, like, I have maybe some of my male clients who I know will literally run themselves into the ground. They will have, and obviously being male, being bigger, they will have greater energy requirements on their training days, just because they are in general expending more energy anyway. So yeah, it's a common split with what you'll see in like professional sport. Rugby players, they will like professional rugby players have a training day rest day split. Bodybuilders as well, especially like the really hardcore ones. Obviously when you bodybuild, you don't really socialize, so therefore that requirement of needing a few extra calories to factor in social events is not there. Same with powerlifters, powerlifters usually train at sort of like, depending on where they are in their training block, a lot of the time they will train at like 100% of their 1RM. So they are doing like 1 reps, which means they need as much energy as physically possible so that they can constantly max out, if they can max out on their PBs and stuff. Obviously, if you're underfueled and you've not eaten very many calories and you go and try and do a PB, like, you're probably not going to get it because your muscles are completely devoid of any energy. So yeah, I would say the training performance split, so training day, rest day split, is usually a one that I would favor among like very serious athletes or very experienced gym goers, and probably mostly male muscle gain or bulking clients, because they are going to be eating, in some instances 3,000 plus calories, and that is quite taxing on the old appetite. So having those high calorie training days to help with performance sandwiched with lower calorie rest days will mean that their appetite sort of regulation is slightly better, rather than consistently eating like 6,000 calories a day. They might have, I don't know, 5,000 calories on training days and 3,000 calories on rest days, basically. So the pros of the training performance splits: it makes sense to have more calories on training days, as I've said. It allows for appetite regulation by having lower calorie days. If you were in a calorie deficit and you had the training day, rest day, calorie split. Did I say if you're in a deficit? Yeah, if you're in a deficit and you had the training day, rest day split, it would actually slow down your metabolism down regulation, which I will come on to at the end. Cons: so training recovery can take up to 48 hours. Obviously, you need calories for recovery. So if you are then really depriving yourself of adequate calories on your recovery days, it could impinge your recovery. So it kind of is like, we still, yes, okay, the energy requirement is less on a rest day, but it doesn't actually mean that your energy requirement is lower, because you still need calories to recover. Like, your muscles use calories as energy and to recover. So it's not that your recovery requirements go down, it's just that your training requirements go down. And obviously we know that training only really burns 150 to 300 calories a day. So extra, obviously, depending on, if you're a woman, you're probably looking at maybe burning an extra 100 to 150 calories, maybe 200. If you're a bloke, you're probably looking at, yes, more like 400, maybe even 500 calories. So yeah, essentially. It doesn't really make sense to do if you're training 5 days a week, because you've still got 5 high calorie days. So you're almost better off doing, well, it's essentially a 5 and 2 split then, but obviously your 2 lower calorie days, most people prefer having their rest days on the weekend, and suddenly your 2 lowest calorie days are on the weekend, but you also want to go out and socialize. So, it's not easy to factor in social events if you're in a calorie deficit doing rest day, training day calories. And also, like, a lot of people train first thing in the morning. They might not want to eat a bulk of their calories around the training window. Obviously, we want to have a big pre-workout to fuel ourselves for our training sessions. You might not want to stomach 500 calories at 5 a.m. in the morning. So it's kind of, again, like, doesn't, obviously, yes, you're getting more calories throughout the day to help with recovery, but it's not necessarily going to help with training performance if you train really early in the morning. If you do want to implement a training day, rest day split, you probably want to allow yourself an extra 200 to 400 calories a day for training days. Cardio doesn't count as training. So, like, you would do your cardio on your rest days, they would be lower calorie days. That can actually make you more hungry. So, again, it's another con. And you kind of want your training days to take up sort of like 60 to 70% of your weekly calories. So that's sort of where we're at with the training performance splits. Social splits, this is something all of my clients are familiar with. Pretty much all of them, maybe bar 1 or 2 people, are on a social split. But that is because most of my clients are trying to lose body fat. So I call these social splits. You could also call it proactive calorie cycling. It's basically a series of lower calorie days, usually Monday to Friday, with a few higher calorie days at the end of the week or throughout the week. But essentially, the higher calorie days are there to help you account for social events essentially. So you're not necessarily, I know obviously, like, you might have a 4-3 split on a training day. Like you could have like 4 training days, so 4 training days and then 3 rest days, and you're like, well, but it's kind of the opposite, because the thing is, like, if you had like a 4-3 split and you had four higher calorie training days and 3 lower calorie rest days, yes, it is like a 4-3 split, but because you've divided your weekly calories up basically, more or less evenly across the 7 days with like a 200 to 400 calorie difference, it's not quite the same. Whereas like a 5-2 split, you'd probably be like, for the average person might look at like 1,600 calories throughout the week and then 2,300 calories on the weekend. So it's kind of the opposite of the 5-2 split, like the training day rest day split, in that, like, where your calories are actually lower probably on your training days and maybe higher on your rest days, if that makes sense. Like, most people want to rest on the weekend. So pros wise, it's great for accommodating social events when you're in a calorie deficit, or even if you are maintaining. It's a flexible approach, so you can pick, what calories you have on what days. Again, it slows down metabolism down regulation when people are dieting. And, if you do have your high calorie days on your training days, then obviously there's more energy availability, for those training sessions. Cons: in some instances, low days can be quite low. It doesn't always favor intense gym performance. If you are someone that trains really, really hard, but you're trying to diet, and like you've got a heavy leg session, you're probably not going to get as much out of that leg session, especially if you're in the arse end of a calorie deficit, been in a calorie deficit for a while. You're probably not going to get as much out of that training session as you might if you were having like more calories. Obviously, there is a greater opportunity for hunger in some instances. If you are a short person that's actually quite light, and isn't overweight, then you will need lower calories to lose weight. Obviously you might be 5'1", but you might have the appetite of a 6'2", rugby player. You're still going to get hungry. So my top tips: basically, don't go too high on your high calorie days. Like, people sometimes think they need like 3,000 plus calories for their high calorie days. It's not the case. You can probably look at 2,000 to 2,500 calories for your high days, and it just means making a couple of sensible decisions throughout the day, so that you still have a bulk of your calories for whatever social event you have. Obviously, the more high days you have, the lower your low days will be. So if you have like three 2,000 calorie days, that might end up being 4 1,400 calorie days. You don't necessarily have to have like 2 super high days. You could have like 1 high day, 1 medium day, 5 low. So for instance, that could look something like 5 days at 1,500 calories, 1 day at 2,500 calories, 1 day at 1,800 calories. So it doesn't have to be like too super high. It can be, the high days basically just mean higher than your low days. So it doesn't have to be 2,000s. It could be just like 300 more than your low days. For instance, that might be something you would look at. Like, I would say the 5 low, 1 high, 1 medium is an ideal split for like if you had like a big night out on Saturday, you'd have 5 low days, Monday to Friday. Saturday would be your high calorie day. Sunday, you've got a higher calorie day, and that's going to help, factor in maybe a Domino's pizza or something. But high volume eating is essential in these, the 5-2 splits. Okay, so the last split is a standard split. So this is basically where you just eat the same amount of calories each day. Now, I kind of mentioned earlier, ultimately, no one ever eats the same amount of calories each day, because tracking, like calorie tracking, is inherently inaccurate. People don't eat the same meals every day, 7 days a week. So even if you did set yourself like a daily calorie goal and it was the same, for the 7 days, you probably wouldn't end up eating that anyway for, a variety of reasons, whether that's appetite, availability of food, inaccuracy of tracking. It could be anything. So it is kind of a moot point. However, it's still something that people might want to do. Like, if you were maintaining, and especially if you're a bloke and you can maintain on quite high calories, and it's quite easy to factor in social events into your daily calorie allowance as you're maintaining. So, let's say your maintenance calories are like 2,500 calories, like it's still quite easy to factor in, social events with that amount of calories. Pros, obviously, as I said, you can still factor in social events into daily calories. It's good for maintaining or bulking clients. Obviously, you know where you stand. There's not a whole lot of maths involved. It is literally a case of you working out really what your daily calorie is, and then by default, you know what your weekly calorie is. Whereas with the social splits and the training performance splits, you kind of have to work backwards in that you have to, work out what your weekly goal is and then go from there. So yeah, like a standard split, you'd just be like, right, well, I know I can maintain on, it'll be a trial and error, and you just be like, well, let's see if I can maintain on 2000. Can I maintain on 2100? Find the happy place. And then you just kind of like stick to that number for the foreseeable. Obviously, it's fine if you're maintaining or bulking, because that number when you're bulking will continuously go up, so it's not going to cause metabolism downregulation. If you're maintaining, again, like, it doesn't really matter what your metabolism is doing because you're maintaining, you're eating enough calories. So it's not really going to change your metabolism if you're, like maintaining or bulking. But if you're eating the same amount of calories each day, like if you're eating like 1,400 calories a day when you were trying to lose body fat, that's when, yes, it might cause metabolism downregulation. It doesn't leave you any flexibility if you are in a calorie deficit, basically, because, once you've used up those calories, you've used up those calories. What I mean, where I'm saying about like metabolism downregulation, essentially, and this only happens when you're in a calorie deficit. So if you are in a calorie deficit and you are basically if you were eating like the same amount of calories each day, this metabolic rate, so this is basically like how many calories you burn a day, would drop quite quickly. But as you can see here, there are low calorie days sandwiched with high calorie days. So whether that's like training day, rest day, or low day, high low day, high day, low day, high day, or even if it was like low day, low day, low day, low day, high day, high day, high day, it means because you're having these higher calorie days, your metabolism is slower to adapt. So essentially, what you want to do when you are in a calorie deficit is preserve your metabolic rate as much as possible, because you essentially, the greater your metabolic rate is, the more calories you're going to burn. And obviously, calorie burn is the be all and end all of calories in versus calories out is the be all and end all of being in a calorie deficit and losing body fat. So going too low too quickly will mean that your metabolism is slow to adapt, which means you have to go even lower before you see any progress. So for instance, I have a client who has eaten in an ultra low calorie deficit, so between 1,000 and 1,200 calories. And the only way that she would basically continue to lose fat is if we went sub 100. Obviously, that's not something we're going to do. So what we've actually had to do is slowly increase her calories so that her metabolism would upregulate to a point where it was like fully functioning at the baseline. And then we've gone back down again. And that's meant that she's actually been able to lose weight because we've slowly built up and her metabolism has adjusted with the amount of food she's eating, because the more food you eat, the faster your metabolism is. It's why people always think, overweight people have slow metabolisms. Actually, they have the fastest of metabolisms because they're eating the most amount of food. Essentially, it's meant that because her metabolism has upregulated to this point, a deficit then could be 1,800 calories for her, and that would work really well. I am actually going to do a metabolism webinar, but I will just show you quickly, like, essentially how it works. Obviously, a lot of my clients will be familiar with reverse dieting, and where we have diet breaks, and it's essentially where you'd increase the amount of calories that you eat, because you can see that your calorie intake and your metabolic rate move up together. So, and usually weight is a little bit slower to come with it, but essentially your metabolic rate will increase as your calorie intake increases. So obviously if you then are starting off, you've reverse dieted and you're here, you're going to need more calories. You can get away with a deficit of like 1,800 rather than a deficit of under 1,000 to actually see any weight loss progress. But yeah, metabolism webinar is coming soon. But yes, that is calorie splits. The most important thing with any calorie split ever is to use a calorie range. And this is because for calorie ranges just give you an extra layer of flexibility. It allows you to change your habits based on your hunger levels, cravings, energy requirements, everything. Like if you haven't watched the calorie range video, I highly recommend you go and watch it, because whatever goal you set yourself, setting yourself like a specific goal, like, and then let's say a specific goal of 1,600 calories is going to set you up less for success than giving yourself a range, because the range is going to allow you to have, if you set yourself 1,600 calories, then maybe you might have a range of 1,500 to 1,700 calories, so that you can basically adapt how much you eat based on how you feel, what you need that day. So even if it was rest day, training day, or like a 5 and 2 split, I would always use a calorie range, just because it makes the process of calorie tracking and tuning into what your body actually needs a lot healthier and a lot better. And it means you're not going to sack off everything because you've gone over your calories by 50 calories. If you've got a range, you know that you've got a little bit of room to work within. So whatever calorie split you choose, whatever calories you set yourself, always make sure you use a calorie range, because it will just make your life and your process 10 times better, 10 times easier, and 10 times more productive from a progress perspective.